Hello and welcome to another episode of ARCA's podcast, Elevated Views. Today, I'm sitting down with Greg, a City of Calgary firefighter and first aid fire extinguisher trainer, to talk about the responsibilities of the fire department, different training options available, and how the construction industry and the fire department work cohesively. So I'm sitting down here today with Greg Heise from Act Now. Greg and his wife Becky teach a lot of our first aid and fire extinguisher classes. So maybe Greg, if you could give us a brief introduction as to what you do, what your company does, and the overall kind of scope that you guys cover here for us at the ARCA.
So Act Now Corporation is our small business. We focus on safety training in general. So we do primarily first aid training, CPR training. That's kind of where we start off. We do some consulting, fire extinguisher safety, and then now, hopefully down the road, we'll do some Fall Pro. Not all the safety stuff, but we do a good chunk of it, kind of our primary focus in as our company.
And what experience do you bring to that?
So I've been with the Calgary Fire Department. It'll be 19 years in October. I started there 2005, and I had no experience with anything. Got through the training. It's a fun job. You get a lot of exposure to a little bit of everything. Busy days and long days sometimes. It's never a dull moment, and that's what I like about that job. It gives you a good background in safety stuff. You see what happens when you're not safe, and you see what happens when people aren't safe. So I think that kind of brings our company, gives us a good background. And Becky, she's not on the fire department. She actually was an educator. She worked for the Calgary Board of Education prior to starting our company. So she was a teacher, which is good. She had been a Red Cross instructor since she's 18. That's like 30 plus years she's been teaching. So we have lots of experience with the first aid stuff. That's kind of our bread and butter. And then we kind of do some other stuff after that as well. So being in the first aid business, the fire department, I do first aid every day. So at some point it just practice, right? It's just you do it every single day almost at work. So it's easy to teach when you do it all the time.
And how did you become involved with the ARCA?
It was actually through a mutual friend. I worked with a gentleman who was a paramedic, and they were friends with Karen. He knew that I taught first aid and CPR, and actually I think I recertified him in his CPR portion. So, but he had mentioned that his friend was the manager of an association. They were looking for someone to do some first aid training, possibly some fire extinguisher stuff. So we kind of had that introduction, and I actually had to look back because I couldn't remember when. And it was actually 2013, December 2013 was the first time we kind of sat down and chatted with Karen about working together.
So you've been working with the ARCA for over 10 years now,
Yep.
Which I think it's been a great relationship. We get a lot of positive feedback. I know from our members who take your courses, and a big portion of that is the real life experience that you bring to those classes. So what do you enjoy the most out of teaching the construction industry? So not maybe specifically the roofers, but I know you teach a variety of different trades and different aspects of the construction industry. What keeps you motivated and what keeps you going on teaching the skills?
Like I grew up in the industry, so done construction. My dad was in construction, so I've been in my whole life. And you see, it's a challenging business. And I tell the guys when I teach, like especially roofers, you're in one of the most hazardous jobs that you have. Just what you do, where you do it, the times that you do it. It's Alberta, so you can have plus 30 to minus 30. You can have 5 km/h winds. You can have 50 km/h winds. It doesn't matter. So, and that adds to the dangerous aspect of the job. To be able to talk to guys and just say, this is how to be safer. I even make it a point, like this is not a safe job. There's gonna be situations that are, well, they're accidents. They call them accidents for that reason. They're not planned. And if stuff happens, how you deal with it's the important part. So I think coming from my background, we're dealing with those types of situations regularly. And for me to have that experience and to know that I've actually done CPR hundreds of times. I can't even remember how many times. Dealt with broken bones. I've dealt with falls from height, things like that. So to give them my experience that I've actually done those types of things, especially in the construction industry, it makes them more comfortable. This person maybe knows what they're talking about. They've got firsthand experience, and you can have the knowledge base and the technical knowledge. If you don't have the experience of doing it, it's a completely different ballgame. Until you've actually done CPR in person, you don't know that feeling of breaking ribs or dealing with an airway or things like that. And that's getting pretty specific stuff. But if you can tell people that, give them examples of what could happen or what might happen in a certain situation, or maybe it prepares them a little better. Because there are always going to be stressful situations, especially emergency situations. And I think the more knowledge you have gives you a better opportunity to be successful if you have a little bit more knowledge.
And being involved for a period of time now, have you found, you probably recognize some of the faces because they recertify every 3 years. Have you heard the feedback from them of things that they've experienced on the job and things that you have taught them in previous classes are now helping them in the industry?
Yeah, for sure. I actually make a point in especially the fire extinguisher courses, I make a point of every class going around the room and talking to guys and say, hey, when was the last time you had a fire? Nobody wants to talk about that stuff, right? But it happens all the time. I know it happens all the time, and I make it
the unknown subject.
Yeah,
nobody wants to talk about it.
Nobody talks about it. But like, what better way to bring out the knowledge than to have the guys who have been doing this job for 20, 30 years or whatever, even 10 years, it doesn't matter. You do it every day, you're going to be exposed to certain situations. We can all learn from those situations. If the wind's really bad, or if I'm in a certain situation where I've got a void space or maybe like a floor drain, not an easy situation to deal with a torch, what other experience have other people had that makes it safer? Or if something did go wrong, how did they deal with it appropriately? And so we do lots of talk like that, and I think might not make people more comfortable, I would say, because everybody handles things differently, but maybe it just gives them a little bit of reassurance that this has happened before and this is what we did to be successful, and then that's hopeful that they can handle the situation the way it needs to be done.
And I know, especially in today's age, we're talking a lot about risk. And I think a lot of people don't understand the close relationship the roofing contractors have with the fire department. Mm-hmm. In a lot of the classes that we teach, if you have a fire, even if it's out, call them. Even if you're on a remote building, say in a municipality that has a volunteer fire department, reach out to them beforehand and say, we are using open flame and just in case. Mm-hmm. How have you seen that relationship of the fire department and the roofers grow over the time that you've been involved with roofing?
That's one of the things I try to make very clear is that you're not bothering the fire department. The biggest reason people don't call the fire department is they're worried about what will happen to them. Am I going to get in trouble? Are these firemen going to be mad at me? Things like this. And I always try to reassure them, this is our job. Our job is to go to these emergencies, to make the situation better. You should feel comfortable calling us. We're there for one reason only, and it's not to reprimand or to scold people. We're there to deal with the problem and make it a safer place. So if you don't call, and I always try to, if you're willing to risk your job or someone's life because you're embarrassed or you feel like, oh, I don't want to get in trouble, like that's the wrong attitude. It's just like anything else, right? So if you call for help and you ask for help, that's a sign, I think, of maturity and responsibility and things like that. So not calling is basically where I say, that's your first mistake. Well, the first mistake was having maybe the fire and whatever you could have done differently, obviously, but if you don't call us, we value the experience of the people. We value the fact that, yes, you're a professional and you know how to do your job, but sometimes things get out of hand. There are accidents, right? So getting somebody there, I try to say, like, I'm on a fire truck and I'm a junior acting captain on the department. I have almost 20 years. So I also have 5 other guys on my truck sometimes. So that could be up to 50, 60 years of experience dealing with fires. If it's a building, like a structure fire, we could have up to 10 trucks there. So you're looking at 500 years of firefighting experience. Like, that experience is what we bring. Yes, you've been working in this industry for 25 years or whatever, but you may have seen a lot, but you haven't seen as much as 500 years of fire emergency type stuff. So we can always bring that knowledge in. And I try to make that more comfortable situation for the workers. There's always going to be consequences to things, but not from us. Bringing in the fire department to make sure a fire's out or to deal with an active fire, that is the best way to solve the problem, and then we can deal with the other stuff after, right? Put fires out and then just cross the fingers and hopefully it's out. That's not an option. And again, it goes back to liability now. And I try to make that very clear to all my classes. Once the fire department comes, and it doesn't matter if you called and said, yeah, the fire's out, we just want to double check. It doesn't matter if there's active flame or fire or smoke. Once we get there, the building is ours, and we take responsibility for it. And there's no longer the liability on the worker. The fire department will leave when the building is deemed safe, and you can go home as the worker, go home, go to bed, get up, come back to work the next day without any fear or anxiety about, oh man, if I come back to work tomorrow and there's no building there. But I think part of that is passing on that liability, and that's our job, is to deal with that. I know there was a lot of like resistance, I guess, and that's just industry in general, the construction industry. It's like, well, I'll just deal with my problems and I can handle it and I can do all this. Well, sometimes you can't handle it, right? And you need help. I have seen more acceptance in calling. We don't want to go there for nothing, but we're not bothered by going. We go to 100 false alarms a day. We end up getting there and there's nothing going on, and that's okay. Right?
Well, and something I like to stress too, we teach it in torch safety, definitely call, but with the years of experience that you bring and the trucks bring when they come to site, there may be a lot of unforeseen or unnoticeable or even materials that a roofing contractor may not know about in that structure that could flame up again, that could smolder, that are beneath the surface. You have that experience, you have that knowledge, so you can make sure they're out. Whereas us, visible flame, it's out, all of our stuff is out, but it's what underneath
exactly
is the big thing. So I know you deal with a lot of structural fires. On another note, what other types of things are you guys responding to nowadays?
Primarily, it's actually medical calls, like the City of Calgary. We're not a paramedic fire service. Basically, we have advanced first aid on our fire trucks. The AHS model of sending an ambulance to every emergency is great. There's more emergencies than they have available ambulances. We get dispatched to anything that's considered life-threatening. So we will be first on scene to a lot of medical calls. We're not there to bring you to the hospital. Like, we're there to make things better till the paramedics get there, because there's the real professionals. Like, they have the most knowledge and experience and training. We basically hold the fort till they get there, and then they take you. So that's probably, I would say, 60 to 70% of our call volume. In Calgary, yeah. And then we kind of move into like hazardous material, whether it's spills, leaks, mechanical failures, like hockey rinks, for example, with ammonia leaks. So those we go to all the time. Carbon monoxide's another big one. Daily occurrence, we go to those, whether it's a detector going off inadvertently or correctly, or maybe it's a faulty HVAC system, and faulty HVAC system will just basically pump CO into an entire building just because it's pumping in heat and all that other stuff. And if it's not working properly, then we go to buildings in trouble like that all the time. So hazardous materials, big one. Obviously, we do our false alarm type, alarm bells type thing, where fire detection systems go off, whether or not there's a fire or not sometimes. And we go to those as well. Structure fires only count to about 6 to 7% of our call volume. So
really, that low?
Yeah, that's low, yeah.
Okay.
And well, you're also thinking, like, what did we do? We did about, I want to think about 70,000 calls last year. So even at 6%,
that's still
it's still going to be a
property.
serious amount. But the day-to-day volume isn't as much. But yeah, we do that. We do, obviously, car accidents, things like that. Just any type of medical emergency, whether it's a extrication where we have to cut someone out of the car, or even just a car accident where someone's got a injured back or something like that. So lots of stuff like that. That's primarily what we're doing.
What you're doing.
It's a lot of stuff.
Now, this may be unfair to ask, but I'll just ask, how many of those are construction related?
I would say, as far as the actual emergency, like a first aid situation, it's significant. Several hundred a year, probably. The challenge with the construction industry, and I try to make guys understand this in classes, whether it's first aid or fire extinguisher, is that the jobs that you do are hazardous. Your emergencies aren't like, oh, you know, I tripped, stubbed my toe, broke my toe going up the stairs or down the stairs, or I tweaked my back lifting something in my backyard.
I cut my toe off
Yes.
with a skill saw.
Yeah, severe cuts, lacerations, falls from height, burns, things like that. So they're a big deal usually when we end up going to construction stuff. And it's not the run-of-the-mill, throw a Band-Aid on and go back to work typically with construction. Whereas what would you do in the office that could be that hazardous? Other than paper cuts, nobody likes paper cuts, right? and I try to make that clear with the fire extinguisher courses. Like, how many times have you been exposed to a fire? Well, roofers are daily, almost, depending on what exactly the day is. But how many people in an office do you think have been exposed to fire? It's a big deal for them. We always get called to those types of things, like someone's waste paper basket, or there's an electrical issue or something like that. Whereas the guys who have a torch in their hand for 7 or 8 hours a day, if something catches on fire, they just put it out and keep going back to work. And I think that we've kind of changed the mindset, hopefully a little bit, in that even though I'm exposed to this all the time, it's still serious and it still can be bad. Recognize that they have experience and that they have the ability to deal with certain situations, just to know when that kind of line is crossed where this isn't something I can handle. And I think that's kind of the big thing with it.
It also just comes with that experience as well, too, is they keep working on that. I guess one of the last questions I know I was going to ask you is, and this is coming up in the news a lot, so you may or may not be able to comment on it, but lithium batteries are becoming a big thing.
Yes.
I know in construction, we use a lot of lithium-ion batteries for a lot of the cordless tools, and I believe it is now better practice never to leave a plug-in charger unattended, definitely so it doesn't overheat, because that's what causes the fire. But are there any other tips or cautions from the fire department side that come into that?
We've always had cordless drills, but it's getting more and more commonplace now. More powerful batteries. We've got more tools that can be used with batteries. So like you look at any kind of Home Depot and they've got, you can skill saws to drills to all the lawn care stuff, but everything runs off batteries now. And the challenge with lithium ion is that it's a hazardous material. It's a metal on fire when it overheats. And so to put it out, it's not easy. Lithium ion, the challenge there is that they are typically superheated. A structure fire, even a campfire, let's say, it's about 200 degrees Celsius, which is very hot. That's very hot. You burn yourself if you touch it. Lithium ion batteries typically, depending on the size, obviously, and the volume of material, they're up to 1,000 degrees. So even something like a battery that's in a thermal runaway, which is what we call it, when the cooling systems in the batteries or something failure, whether it's the damage or overuse or just a manufacturer's defect, when they start to overheat, and then it's basically like called a thermal runaway, and that it's just the increasing of heat and burning. And so it actually burns metal. So that's what the lithium ion, it's a metal fire. So with that, it should always be a 911 call. Because any overheating, and I'm not talking, we've all used our cell phones and our laptops and things, and they get warm from overuse. This would be like if you touched it and you burnt your fingers, or any discoloration or odd smells or bulging or smoking or deformation of a battery. Those would be signs that it is overheating and then possibly a thermal runaway. Once that starts, it actually does not go out. It does not go out until all the material is burnt. So depending on how much lithium ion is in there, other components, things like that, and depending on what's surrounding that component, like batteries are typically very safe and built to be contained, but when you get into that thermal runaway situation, they will burn the container. That's where you get the discoloration and bulging and the deformation of the container. And once that's happening, there's no putting it out until all that material's burned, and that can take hours, even days. Like with an EV vehicle, they've had a car fire 2 weeks after its initial fire. Brand EV, you take it to the car lot because it got in an accident, you leave it there, and they've come in like a week or two later and it's on fire. So just depending on the battery and where it's located and the size, if it's compromised and there's any energy left in it, it can start that chain reaction, which is what burns the lithium ion, and then once it starts, it just burns till it's empty.
So from a firefighting point of view, it's definitely a different tactic
Yep.
on fighting those. Do you have to submerge them, or are there different chemicals or different methods that you use to?
There are different methods. We do submerge what we can. So let's say we had a cordless drill, had started to burn and catch fire. We would take it, put it in a bucket of water. Now it stays in that bucket of water for days because you actually don't put that fire out with that water. It just keeps it cool, contained, till it burns off all the material. So as you get bigger batteries, i.e. a car, the challenge is the same, but you've got much more hazardous materials, you got much more fuel, you've got all that stuff. So I know in the States, a lot of companies, fire departments, they actually have a protocol where they would just take the EV car, if they thought it was compromised, the battery, and they would put it in a sea can and fill it full of water and then leave it there for 3 weeks and then come back. And that's the protocol for dealing with some EV fires down in the States. And we don't have that. So we would basically just try to make the area as safe as possible. If there was no exposures, which means anything else that could catch on fire, we would actually just let the car burn until it burned all the fuel off. Because that's the only true way to put out an EV fire, is to let it burn itself out. There are certain chemicals like metal fire extinguishers and Class D extinguishers that you could theoretically use on a Class D fire, which is a metal fire, but With a battery, it's sealed. You actually can't get in to do it. So unless you opened up that battery pack, and if you've ever seen an EV car battery, there's like 700 bolts on this thing, right? You're not taking that apart when it's on fires. So those are the challenges. If I had a pile of lithium ion just burning on the ground and I had a Class D extinguisher, I could put it out. But because we don't have typically access to the batteries, because they're just the way they're built.
They're contained, they're built in.
You can't put them out. We would try to control the scene and make sure that it's not going to expand. There's no actual way to put it out currently with what we have as far as extinguishment materials. So it's challenging.
Does that go along the same lines as, say, a photovoltaic cell?
Yep.
Has those rare earth metals on there as well too?
Yeah.
So can those reignite?
They can. Okay. So depending on, again, you can cool them at least to the point where, because you'll have exposure to them. Trying to be careful because you've got electricity involved, but getting a large amount of water on there would cool it enough to stop the actual burning. The challenge there is to do it without electrocuting yourself. And we're up on the roof with solar regularly now. I think pretty much it's a common occurrence. And if there's any issues that you see, discoloration, smoking, odd smells, that type of burning, kind of all those telltale signs, just leave and call 911. We will deal with it as best we can. We physically would not just get up there and take this thing out. If I had a pot on a stove that was burning, I'd just pick it up and carry it away and put it down in a sink or something. But with the solar cells or the panels, typically they're huge, and so we just would put water on it, or we would put a water foam mixture on it because that would reduce the electrocution hazard for us. So we have those abilities. Obviously, dry chem's an option. It's just typically not going to cool, right? So that's the one drawback with a dry chemical extinguisher. It's a good smothering agent. It can make that fuel/oxygen separated, so the fire will eventually cool off and go out, but it doesn't actually cool it quickly. The challenge with the guys on the roof, whether it's wood fire or flammables and stuff, is you have to know what you're using and using the appropriate. It's okay to use both, and I think that's what people forget. If you're having to use a dry chem because it's a flammable liquid, you put your fire out, and if there's some wood or other kind of normal combustibles like wood, paper, plastic, you can put water on that even though you had fuel or gas there, as long as that fire's out. And that's the challenge, knowing when to do what, and that's why we always ask that you call the fire department, just to be the safest way to do it.
In the fire extinguisher course and our torch safety course and everything, roofers have to, well, in our program, have both water and the ABC extinguishers on site. Because of that combination of fiberboard, we could have some flammable liquids, and everything is covered. So we are prepared for that, and we do get trained in that. Anything that we kind of missed that you'd like to bring up about?
Pretty much off the top of my head, I think that's most of it. I would hope that we've made that kind of resistance to calling for help less resistant, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but more acceptable and more of a positive thing to call the fire department and to get people with experience and knowledge there, right? That's what you want. There's certain situations you can handle, there's certain situations you can't, and recognizing those are the ones that we need to do a better job of. Because we still do have fires, unfortunately, and we can eliminate the big fires. It's a high hazard job, especially roofing. There's going to be things that happen and there will be fire. It's just how we manage that. I firmly believe is manageable. Now, if it's a big fire and it has to call the fire department, they have to put it out, that's fine. That's still managing it. It's better than I think we got it out, we'll be good, fingers crossed, come back tomorrow and finish the job. And sometimes that doesn't happen.
Better to call, so then you have a place to come back to the next day.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Well, Greg, thank you very much for your time. It's been great talking with you, as always. Hopefully people listening have learned a couple things along the way, and look forward to our continued relationship between the fire department and the roofing contractors.
Great time. We can do this again anytime.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to another episode of ARCA's Elevated Views. We hope you have enjoyed the program. For additional information on ARCA, our contractors, or our program, please go to arcaonline.ca. Or you could follow us on Instagram at Roofing Careers, or on LinkedIn at ARCA-Alberta Roofing Contractors Association. Thanks and have a great day.